Hello, fifth graders. We are in ELA Unit 1, Module B. We're going to continue with Chapter 1. Are you ready to read more about the reality show Washed Up? As we were reading, I have been pondering some thoughts about this story. When I think of the different parts of the island so far and how it was described, it appears there are going to be several different settings. I wonder how the contestants will do for survival. Will the settings make a difference? I wonder what challenges they will face. Today, we are learning to compare and contrast two or more characters, settings, or events in a story. We will do this by identifying the details in the text. We will be successful by completing a graphic organizer to show how the families and settings are related. We are also going to determine the meaning of words and phrases used in a text, particularly when we identify figurative language like metaphors and similes, and use context clues to figure out what they mean. We're also going to be learning how to determine the meaning of academic words specific to other content areas. We'll draw on specific details in the text to determine the meaning. We'll be successful with these two components when we discuss the various meanings of the metaphors and similes or the academic words based on the context clues. Let's look at some particular academic words specific to the story that I would like you to know. However, remember, as we read, you may find other words that you would also like to document as a vocabulary word. The first word is going to be shelter. We'll find it on page 14. Shelter can be used as a noun or as a verb, so keep that in mind as we see it in the text. Is it going to be a person, place, thing, or idea? Or is it an action word based on the text? Let's look at the different definitions. One is something that covers and protects, a shelter, covering and protecting. Okay. Another might be a place that provides food and housing for others, like a homeless shelter. A place that houses and feeds stray or unwanted animals. Well, we've heard of those shelters before too, haven't we? In Topeka, it's the Helping Humane Society. As a verb, it's the act of providing food or housing. The second word is rations, page 16. It's a noun, but this time with the S added on, it's plural. So it means more than just one set amount. So it would be the amounts of food or water allowed, usually for one day. It's a supply of something. So after we read the text, let's think of how you could draw a representation for each of those words in the particular text that we're reading. Here, I've begun a story map. As we read, we begin to analyze the text. For instance, good readers will connect with the setting, not only the place and the time, but the events that are taking place. As we read, a particular setting will emerge. I want to challenge you to think how this is particularly important to the story. Some essential questions to think about as we read are, how do readers identify the relationships and interaction in the text? And how do writers develop a topic? So let's begin reading. We're on page 12. It was deathly silent as the skipper cut the engine, letting the boat glide gently into the mangrove swamp that would be home to the Garcias for the next 3 weeks. Mr. Garcia gazed at the muddy sludge around him, his jaw twitching. "It'll be okay, Papa," lied Gabriella as she surveyed the murky water, so shallow that the gnarled roots of the trees snaked above the waterline like the tangled hair of Medusa. As you see, I have underlined some words on this page. Why do you think I have done so? That's right. I thought they might be words you are not familiar with. And as good readers, I want you to begin to recognize words you aren't familiar with and use good reading strategies to understand what they mean. For instance, the word skipper is underlined. When I read around the word skipper, I see the Garcias are in a boat and the skipper cut the engine, meaning turned the engine off. That would tell me a skipper is the one driving the boat. What clues might tell you what mangrove means? Good. Well, first of all, I see it as a word describing a swamp. It's telling me what kind of swamp. And when I look at the picture, I see the boat is gliding in very low water, the swamp, with a lot of trees with large roots showing. I can infer then a mangrove is a type of tree that lives in swampy areas. How would you use context clues to help you know what sludge means? And murky? And gnarled, notice the G is silent, G-N together, usually says N, not gn. This is a challenge you may want to do while you enhance your reading skills to figure out what those words mean. Look around the text, look around the words, and see how those words might be, the meaning of those words and how they are used in the text. Now let's look at the figurative language on this page. Roots of the trees snaked above the water line like the tangled hair of Medusa. This is a simile. I know that because it is using the word, that's right, the word like. It is comparing the gnarled roots of the trees to Medusa's tangled hair. Medusa is a mythical goddess that had twisting poisonous snakes for her hair. So if the tree roots were like Medusa's hair, that would mean they would be protruding out of the swamp or easily seen above the ground and all tangled up. That simile does create a good picture in my mind. How about you? Let's continue. It couldn't be easy for Mr. Garcia. He had never been the adventurous type. He was happy working the same job for 20 years, living in the same house, and doing a pretty good job of raising his daughter on his own. That is, until the company he worked for suddenly shut down and he lost his job. Then a new reality series called Washed Up asked for volunteers, and Gabriella's father did the unthinkable. He applied. The tide will come in soon, said Gabriella, squinting at the solid wall of roots stretching out in the front of them. So we better find higher ground. What are some details from pages 12 and 13 that indicate Mr. Garcia is probably nervous or upset? I'll take you back to 12. That's right. Here's one right now. His jaw was twitching. That's a good sign. He was nervous. Wonder what he was nervous about. And it also said that Gabriella told him that she was trying to comfort him and said it would be okay. So Gabriella, his daughter, also noticed he was nervous and she was trying to comfort him. You did notice, though, however, that she lied to her father. Can we then assume then that Gabriella does know something about the environment and understands it might not be so okay? I wonder how the Garcias are going to deal with this. And how is the Garcias' environment about to change? And how will they deal with that? What is in the environment? What in the environment is causing it to change? The swamp setting is near the ocean, and so the tide is coming in. Oh, quick fact. The moon is what affects the tide. So I have a challenge for you. I have a website listed down on the bottom of this page, 13. And I would like for you to think, why would the moon affect the tide? Being in Kansas, you may not be too familiar with being on the beach or near an ocean. But when the tide comes in, that means the water rises, which means the Garcias will need to go to higher ground, so they won't be swept away into the ocean when the tide goes back out. So you might want to click on that link, do some research. Let's read the page. It couldn't be easy for Mr. Garcia. He had never been the adventurous type. Yes, we already read it. We're rereading. He was happy working the same job for 20 years, living in the same house, and doing a pretty good job of raising his daughter on his own. That is, until the company he worked for suddenly shut down, and he lost his job. Then a new reality series called Washed Up asked for volunteers, and Gabriella's father did the unthinkable. He applied. Before I read that next paragraph, I would like for you to think for a minute. Why do you think Mr. Garcia applied for the reality series Washed Up? What from the text gives us a clue that he thought it would be a good idea? He's not adventurous, it says. And it sounds like he's not being used to being in the outdoors. I wonder what's up. Let's read the last paragraph and then we'll go on. The tide will come in soon, said Gabriella, squinting at the solid wall of roots stretching out in front of them. So we'd better find higher ground. Let's go on. Meanwhile, the Lus were doing some climbing of their own. The chopper had dropped them off next to a steep mountain slope. Shen and May were as nimble as mountain goats, but Mr. and Mrs. Lu kept stopping to wave at the cameras and to catch their breath. May shivered. The wind was vicious above the tree line. Far above them loomed the snow-covered volcano. Right now it was hard to imagine that this was once the site of a powerful eruption, spewing red-hot lava for miles around. Did you notice the figurative language on this page? What was it? That's right. Shan and May were as nimble as mountain goats. What kind of figurative language is this, and how do you know? That's right. It's a simile because it's comparing Shen and May to the nimbleness of mountain goats. But how did you know it was a simile? That's right. It used the word as. When I read that, I think of the little rhyme, Jack be nimble, Jack be quick, Jack jumped over the candlestick. What do you think nimble means? It said that Shin and May were as nimble as mountain goats. Good. It does. It shows that Shin and May are in good athletic shape and they are able to climb and do the more difficult tasks physically that they may be required to do on this show. However, it also shows a difference with their parents. Mr. and Mrs. Lu are not as in good physical shape. They had to stop and catch their breath as they were climbing. Of course, they were all about the show, too, because they kept waving to the camera. What else does that indicate about Mr. and Mrs. Lu? Yes, that's right. They are thinking of this more as a good vacation rather than maybe a challenge physically. Do you think they're going to find this experience wonderful, or difficult? Why or why not? Hmm. There's not enough wood here to build both a fire and a shelter, said Shin. The Lu siblings had seen enough survival shows to know that they would need both soon. May glanced up. The sun would go down over the mountain in a few hours. We'll head downhill first thing tomorrow to where the cover thickens, she said. That's fine, said Mr. Lu. Now blow a kiss to the camera. Do you remember what it means to put an icon between the paragraphs? That's right. It means there is a change. It looks like a symbol, and this text is going to be a leaf. Let's read and find out what the change is. Closer to sea level, Oliver Walpole hurried his mother past the scorpion scuttling across the forest floor. His mother's island euphoria would give way to the utter panic if she saw any of these nasties. So, what was the change? That's right. Now we have not only a setting change, but we are reading about the Walpoles. What is a forest floor? What picture is created in your mind when you read forest floor? Making pictures in our mind as we read can really assist us in understanding text, but especially if the pictures make sense. It's a good thing I didn't picture my kitchen floor in the middle of the forest. Did you see another word in the text you may not have known? That's correct, euphoria. I noticed this word. What do you think it means? Use your clues from what you know about Mrs. Walpole and think about how she might react if she saw the scorpion. And why? Did you come up with a definition? Write it down and the word euphoria and share your thoughts with your teacher. It's marvelous, isn't it? She exclaimed, oblivious. Suffocating would have been a better word to describe it. Oliver thought. It was hotter here than on the beach, even though only a chink of greenish light pierced the forest canopy. Here, let me wash that, Mrs. Walpole screeched, and before Oliver could stop her, Mrs. Walpole had spilled half their thermos of water on the small fruit he had just picked up. You shouldn't have done that, Mom, he protested, a little loudly. His heart sank. Their water rations were down to half already. Can you please tell me why was it such a problem that Mrs. Walpole poured water over the fruit? That is correct. It is because they did not have much water and she had poured half of the water they had. I wonder what's going to happen. We have another change, don't we? There's the leaf. Many miles away, Berry Blue, in an animal print dress now, was speaking to the cameras again. Don't they look like they're having so much fun? She purred. Things always start out that way. And then a sharp glint came to her eyes as she said, But their rations will soon run out. And daylight too. And then darkness and hunger and thirst will set in. Here she tittered. And that's when the real fun begins, dear viewers. It only gets better or worse. So, as we read, we began to analyze the text. For instance, good readers will connect with the setting, not only the place and the time, but the events that are taking place. So, as we read, a particular setting started emerging, correct? All right, so let's look at this. Mr. Garcia and his daughter, Gabriella, are the characters for the Garcias. What do we know about each of these characters? How well do you think they are prepared to survive? So we know that Mr. Garcia is a single parent raising Gabriela by himself. We also know that Mr. Garcia is used to working in an office and not used to working outdoors. And it doesn't seem like he's actually very athletic either. We know that Gabriella has a positive attitude, and she does seem a little bit more familiar with the environment and survival techniques. Let's see how they do. What I would like for you to do is now think about the wall pulls and the loos. You may use the slideshow, this video, or ReadyGen to access the text. Complete the graphic organizer for the Walpoles and the Lou family, just like we did with the Garcias. Write a few notes of the relationships and interactions. And record in your notebook how well you think they will survive and why. Here are some challenge questions for you about what we read today. Think about using the context clues and how the characters were interacting to answer the questions. You can do this. Here are the questions that are challenge. This is optional, but I think it would really be very beneficial for your reading skills. Number 1, what do we know from page 13 that would indicate the reason for Mr. Garcia being nervous or uncomfortable? Number 2, list the different settings each family is located. Think about how they are similar and how they are different. Number 3, draw a picture of how you pictured one of the locations on the island. How would you plan to survive in that particular setting? There are the resources. You can do this, fifth graders.